Jesuit control of the Vatican, 1902. Indeed, the Black Pope Spaniard Louis Martin, 1892 to 1906, was in total control of the Vatican Empire, and its openly anti-Masonic sovereign monarch Pope Leo XIII, whose Cardinal Secretary of State, Count Mariano Rampolla, was secretly a leading member of the Masonic Order of Oriental Templars, OTO. The Pope of the Order's making was now infallible, and thus the entire Roman College of Cardinals and hierarchy could be ruled through the decrees of just one man. With the Jesuits as the Pope's penholders, any ultramontane dogma could be promulgated, further whipping Roman Catholic peoples into blind obedience to the Jesuit pontiff ruling the papacy, the company, and both the British and American empires. The Jesuit superior general would punish all nations having expelled his order during the 19th century, the century of disaster. Jesuit control of the Capitol and Executive Mansion, 1888. The serpent of the Jesuit order begins its quest for total control of the Capitol. From the door or nearby Georgetown University, it passes by a fallen President Lincoln, assassinated by Washington's mastermind, Jesuit priest and confessor to both, John Wilkes Booth and John H. Surratt, Bernardine F. Widget. The papal serpent winds up around the Capitol building with the head of Pope Leo XIII desirously gazing at the presidential mansion, controlled today by the orders. Trust the third party, the infamous New York Council on Foreign Relations, Washington in the lap of Rome, Justin D. Fulton, 1888. Jesuit-headed octopus, ruling 14th Amendment America, 1900. Georgia's U.S. Senator Thomas E. Watson, the sage of Hickory Hill, wrote in 1912 of the all-encompassing power Rome and Jesuit rule Washington, D.C. Today, the Roman priest is the most insolent and arrogant man in America. The politicians do his bidding. The press is afraid of him. His powerful hand controls Congress and the president. He's forcing his church into a union with the state. His greedy paws are raking public funds out of national treasuries for the use of his church. In the United States, political Romanism is sweeping all before it. A few months ago, American prelates assured Pope Pius X that our republic would soon belong to Rome. Not many weeks since, an American Roman Catholic bishop declared that his church meant to capture the presidency. It is already the power behind the throne. James Cardinal Gibbons was a potentate whom President Grover Cleveland dared not offend. And Masonic presidents McKinley, Roosevelt, and Taft have been notoriously controlled in various instances by the same insidious influence, irresistible influence. New York City's Tammany Hall is a Catholic organization. Jesuit priest Bernard Vaughan says that Roman Catholics will soon rule this country. Rome is conquering, has completely conquered North America. Heirs of the Roman Catholic Church and its insidious influence in the United States and other countries. 15 contributors. The Roman Catholic hierarchy, the deadliest menace to American liberties and Christian civilization. Thomas E. Watson, page 7, 32, 30, 38, 32. Papal Knight John P. Morgan, 1837 to 1913, financial master of New York City, the Black Pope's commercial center for the White Pope's Holy Roman 14th Amendment, socialist, communist, corporate, fascist, British-connected, Masonically ruled, militaristic American empire created to restore the Pope's temporal power around the world. Finance of the Black Pope's Masonic Mormon leader Brigham Young. House of Morgan having financed France's Franco-Prussian War against Protestant Prussia and England's Boer War against the Protestant Boers. Financier in the building of the Order's Panama Canal, preparing for World War I. Intimate associate with the Black Pope's Masonic British King Edward VII, creator of the U.S. Steel for the Order's SMOM-led military-industrial complex. Impetus behind the creation of the Black Pope's evil Federal Reserve Bank. Financer Masonic King Edward VII's Jesuit rule triple entente of World War I. Affiliate of Yale University. employer of Skull and Bonesman Harold Stanley, financial master Masonic Presidents Theodore Roosevelt, William H. Taft, financial master of President Wilson via CFR founder Thomas Lamont, financial slave of the Empire's Americanist, Jesuit trained and advised Archbishop of Baltimore James Cardinal Gibbons, the American Pope. The House of Morgan, an American banking dynasty in the rise of modern finance, Ron Chernow. The Jesuit generals, American Vatican banker J.P. Morgan, 1912. Morgan, the 33rd degree enshrined Freemason, is on the White Star Pier in 1912, about the time of the sinking of the Titanic, canceling his reservation at the last minute due to supposed illness, and his art treasure unable to be loaded due to the pretended difficulties at the pier. Morgan skillfully avoided the intended fate of his death ship. With the orders, Jewish American adversaries out of the way, not forgetting the calculated murder of hundreds of heretic Scandinavian Lutherans and liberal Irish Roman Catholics, in accordance with the orders, Council of Trent, Morgan and his Illuminati Masonic brethren, including King George V, John D. Rockefeller Sr., and England's Rothschild agent Jacob H. Schiff, could now create the Bank of England's American cousin to finance the Pope's Second 30 Years' War and the creation of Labor Zionist Israel. 9 months before the orders Federal Reserve Act became law, Morgan died in a $500 day suite of Rome's Grand Hotel, delirious with fever and a racing pulse. Heretic Morgan was another victim of the Black Pope's poison cup. Indeed, for the love of money is the root of all evil, 1 Timothy 6:10. Morgan, American financier Gene Strauss. Illuminatus, John Davison Rockefeller Sr., 1839 to 1937, John D. Rockefeller Sr. and John D. Rockefeller Jr., 1874 to 1960, Knights of Malta, Nicholas F. Brady, 1878 to 1930, and Joseph P. Grace, father of SMOM J. Peter Grace Jr., were potent New York industrialists. Joe Grace was also a director of Rockefeller's International Pro-Nazi National City Bank. Junior's cousin, Percy, was a member of the Black Pope Skull and Bones. The Rockefellers, an American dynasty, Peter Collier and David Horowitz. John D. Rockefeller Sr. and John D. Rockefeller Jr. in 1920. The Black Popes, white Gentile, corporate fascist, socialist, communist, key Masonic, Jesuit temporal court Judas, a Jesuit-ruled New York City, words cannot express the utter revulsion and disgust of every AV 1611 Bible-believing, liberty-loving, white Protestant and Baptist patriot at the mention of these nefarious, brutal, heartless, and depraved reprobates. As wandering stars, to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. Jude 13. Both of these Masonic Germanic apostate Baptists were involved in creating the Orders Federal Reserve Bank in New York City. John D. Rockefeller Jr. was in fact the son-in-law of Senator Nelson Aldrich, who chaired the secret meetings at Jekyll Island. Working in conjunction with the Orders, House of Morgan, the House of Rockefeller, via its evil foundation, became the Black Pope's ultimate financier of every Jesuit intrigue calculated to destroy the accursed Protestant Reformation's Bible-based high white Western civilization while restoring the Pope's temporal power around the world, one day to be centered in Jerusalem, benefiting from the Order's creation of 14th Amendment America in 1868. Sr. formed the Standard Oil Company Trust in 1870. By 1880, he controlled the refining of 90% of America's oil, and by 1900 had ruthlessly built his international monopoly in petroleum, managing 2/3 of the world's oil supply for the designs of the company. After J.P. Morgan created U.S. Steel in 1901, he chose John D. Rockefeller Sr. as one of its directors. When the Socialist Sons of Loyola created the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, in 1909 for the short-term benefit of blacks and the long-term destruction of both whites and blacks, they used the socialist Harvard graduate and Masonic mulatto Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. The NAACP's financier was Sr. When the Order created its ecumenical Bible-rejecting Federal Council of Protestant and Baptist Churches. Again, Rockefeller monies were employed in conquering the Russian Orthodox Church, including its Romanov protectors. The order used Freemasonic John D. Rockefeller Jr. to finance the Bolshevik Revolution, igniting the Second 30 Years' War. In 1914, the order used its Rockefeller oil monopoly to fuel both sides. In 1924, the order would use Morgan banker Charles Dawes to loan a total of $800 million in creating German chemical giant IG Farben, the backbone for Pope Pius XII's Nazi Third Reich. Rockefeller's National City Bank would handle 3/4 of the loans. Thus, an alliance was created with Rockefeller Standard Oil in New Jersey, now Exxon. Its president, Walter Teagle, had been the close associate of Farben president and convicted war criminal, Papal Knight Hermann Schmitz. During the Cold War, the orders Morgan Rockefeller CFR-controlled Federal Reserve Bank would continue to build Rome's USSR and finance the company's bloody inquisition in China. The orders Chairman Mao having expelled 8,000 Bible-preaching missionaries. Meanwhile, the Rockefellers supported the Vatican's Catholic University of America and its University of Notre Dame. Knight of Malta, Thomas Fortune Ryan, 1851 to 1928. One of the Black Pope's Irish Roman Catholic masters of Wall Street, Ryan was orphaned. At 14, converted to Jesuit Catholicism after his marriage to Ida Ryan, made a Countess of the Holy Roman Empire by Pope Pius X in Baltimore, America's East Coast Catholic city named after fishing village and island. He then moved to New York City and became a partner with William C. Whitney and a friend, the German Roman Catholic Charles M. Schwab, J.P. Morgan's first president of U.S. Steel. Ryan purchased his own seat on the New York Stock Exchange, working elaborate deals with his chief lieutenant, Masonic Jewish Zionist Bernard Barrett, a master of the orders Tammany Hall, looter of both the traction lines of New York City and Seaboard Airline Railway, corrupt of courts of legislators, purchase of political nominations, and debaucher of Virginia politics. Ryan owned a network of railroads, street railroads, lighting systems, coal companies, tobacco companies, life insurance companies, and diamond mines. His international operations extended into coke, coal, oil, lead, and typewriters, while he reorganized the diamond mines of the Congo Free State, owned by the orders, intimate associate of the Grand Master Knights of Malta, and murderer of 10 to 15 million black Congolese, King Leopold II. By 1910, Knight Ryan was worth $100 million. He built a huge mansion on Fifth Avenue, hosting a private chapel for the company from its nearby church of St. Francis Xavier. With ties to Morgan, Rockefeller, and Schiff interests, Knight Ryan aided his papal masters in financially ruining his Jesuit Georgetown-educated son, Alan A. Ryan, for warring with the Vatican's New York Stock Exchange. Real Race, America's Irish Rich, Stephen Birmingham. FRA, Ludovico Scilli della Rovere Albani, 1940s, the 76th Grand Master of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, SMOM, 1931 to 1951, warlord of the Black Pope's Second 30 Years' War. Holding the status of a Roman senator / cardinal, Italian Prince Shigi was the master of 12,000 people composing the world's high nobility. Knight Franz von Papen brought Hitler to power. Knight Joseph P. Kennedy brought FDR to power. Knight Joseph J. Larkin serviced the Third Reich as a vice president of Rockefeller's Chase Bank. Knight Baron Papal Chamberlain and industrialist Luigi Paroli aided Knight Donovan's OSS in saving SS General Karl Wolff from Allied Justice. Knight J. Peter Grace Jr. was the key behind Operation Paperclip, which brought thousands of Nazis into the U.S. after the war. Knight Friedrich Wilhelm Schultz Wenck employed former Nazis at his Volkswagen plant in Brazil. Knights Juan Perón and Baron Ezeki protected Martin Bormann in Buenos Aires. And Knight George D. Mohrenschildt, the future CIA/JFK assassin, was also given refuge in America. This Russian noble being a friend of Rome's Shigi family, as that name appears in George's address book. Horizon, the Knights of the Maltese Cross, Edith Simon, page 69. The Splendid Blonde Beast, Christopher Simpson, page 201. Aftermath, Martin Bormann and the Fourth Reich, page 299. Freemason and CFR member Walter C. Teagle, 1878 to 1962, president of Rockefeller Standard Oil of New Jersey, 1917 to 1937, personally held 500,000 shares in American IG Farben. Heinrich Himmler with IG Farben officials at Auschwitz, 1941. Jesuit Temple Court Judas Reichsführer Himmler and Farben chief engineer Walter Dorfeld inspected the Auschwitz plan. The obvious connection between the Black Pope's SS/SD and the IG Farben Rockefeller corporate conglomerate sustains the conclusion that without the Archbishop or New York CFR-based Rockefeller Morgan financial backing, Hitler would never have risen to power. Further, Himmler's circle of friends included Knights of Malta Fritz Thyssen and Frederick Flick, thus linking the Vatican directly to the order of the SS. World Without Cancer, the story of vitamin B17, G. Edward Griffin, The Crime and Punishment of IG Farben, Joseph Borkin, German Knight of Malta Hermann Schmitz, 1881 to 1960, president of IG Farben, associate of Standard Oil of New Jersey's Walter Teagle, convicted at Nuremberg, released by U.S. High Commissioner John J. McCloy, nephew Robert, employed by SMOM J. Peter Grace Jr. via W.R. Grace and Company. World Without Cancer, the story of vitamin B17, G. Edward Griffin, the bombing of Auschwitz, should the Allies have attempted it, Michael J. Neufeld. Auschwitz death camps 1, 2, and 3, IG Farben Zone 4, 1944. The Black Pope's high-level socialist, communist, Freemasons, Chinese Oriental mass murderer Mao Zedong, 1893 to 1976. Black/mulatto American W.E.B. Du Bois, 1868 to 1963. W.E.B. Du Bois, The Fight for Equality in the American Century, 1919 to 1963. David Lewis. The Black Pope's high-level socialist, communist, Freemasons, Mao Zedong and W.E.B. Du Bois. With the Black Pope's American Council on Foreign Relations and British Royal Institute of International Affairs enthroning the murderous Chairman Mao in 1949 via the Central Intelligence Agency and British Secret Intelligence Service, Du Bois, a mulatto Harvard graduate and founder of the Rockefeller Finance National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, admires this Grand Inquisitor who purged China of its Bible-believing New Testament churches after expelling 8,000 Protestant and Baptist missionaries, declaring, "I am a Bolshevik," on his 1926 trip to the Soviet Union, and later beloved for excusing Stalin's terror. This rabid spokesman for the forced integration of America's white and black races declared the one hope of American Negroes is socialism. Hating Marcus Garvey's separatist Back to Africa movement, Du Bois refused to heed Garvey's sober warning of an impending race war within 50 to 100 years and rejoiced over his opponent's unjust deportation brought about by agents of the company ruling President Harding's Justice Department. Residing in Harlem's Rockefeller-built Dunbar Apartments and backed by Knight of Columbus, Historical Commission Chair Dr. Edward McSweeney, a former Deputy Immigration Commissioner at Ellis Island, having aided the order in making America dominantly Catholic, he wrote The Gift of Black Folk in 1924, promoting abortion rights, women's suffrage, and black social equality, i.e. supremacy via affirmative action, and many other federal programs. Du Bois, affiliated with the orders ADL-backed American Jewish Congress, having betrayed his own racial brethren into Hitler's death camps during World War II, openly opposing Cardinal Spellman's Cold War, including the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, Marshall Plan, and Korean War. He joined the Communist Party in 1961. Renouncing his U.S. citizenship, he moved to the city of Accra in the communist-controlled black nation of Ghana. with the aid of its bishop and secret Jesuit Joseph O. Bowers, ordained by the protector of the American branch of the Knights of Malta, SMOM Francis, Cardinal Spellman himself. Meanwhile, the order proceeded with its Fabian socialist anti-white middle-class civil rights movement enforced with federal bayonets on the segregationist white peoples of the South, with the blessing of Masonic socialist communist and Kennedy assassin Lyndon Baines Johnson. Several key meetings were hosted by Masonic lodges in the South, with Roman priests visible in every major march, led by the socialist communist Michael, alias Martin Luther King. The secret purpose of the Jesuits was to use the poverty of American blacks while persecuted by the orders Masonic Ku Klux Klan as a justification for the CFR-controlled federal legislators to destroy the white Protestant middle class via Fabian socialist policies. In order to survive, all whites would be driven into the order's socialist, Nazi, fascist, New Republican right controlled by the Knights of Malta. Black Freemason Asa Philip Randolph, 1889 to 1979, shaking hands with white Freemason President Lyndon B. Johnson, 1964. In presenting Randolph with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, Johnson continued the quest of the order in ruining the Lord's historic white Anglo-Saxon Protestant and Baptist peoples, composing the nation's food-producing, religiously tolerant middle class. Via forced integration, massive socialism, and thieving redistribution of the wealth, the order's civil black agitation would be an unending struggle for universal equality between whites and blacks. Known as Mr. Black Labor, Randolph was the company's foremost civil rights leader, was an associate of Du Bois, and served as communist Martin Luther King's chief strategist, advisor, and tactician. Considering the order's Bolshevik revolution to be the greatest achievements of the 20th century, while acting in conjunction with his brother white Masonic socialists, including Presidents Roosevelt, Truman, and Johnson, as well as Masonic Supreme Court Justices Earl Warren and Thurgood Marshall. Randolph played a key role in completely integrating America's industrial base, armed forces, public schools, professional sports, and entertainment industry. Always controlling both sides of every agitation, the order has made its American empire a pro-black nation of color via its socialist, Freemasonic, and visible empire, all the while utilizing notorious Masonic Jewish Zionists such as Randolph's coadjutor and chairman of the order's American Jewish Congress, Rabbi Joachim Prince, to the end that universal anti-Jewish fury may be later created for the greater glory of God. Mr. Black Labor, the story of A. Philip Randolph, father of the Civil Rights Movement, Daniel S. Davis, Morgan P. Henry Davison, Rockefellers, Nelson Aldrich, Rockefeller home on Jekyll Island, Georgia, 1913. At this cottage, America's most powerful bankers created the Black Pope's Federal Reserve Bank. Those present were Rockefeller's U.S. Senator Aldrich, J.P. Morgan's H.P. Davison, Jacob Schiff's Paul Warburg, Kuhn, a Loeb Company, Frank Vanderlip, a National City Bank, and Charles D. Norton of the First National Bank, backed by President Wilson and his Masonic Treasury Secretary, William Jennings Bryan. The act became law on December 23, 1913. The order's Masonic white Gentile cartel capitalists created a bank credit to finance the mutual destruction of white Protestant and white Orthodox nations with the Second 30 Years' War and the Cold War, the House of Morgan, an American banking dynasty, and the rise of modern finance. Ron Chernow. Freemason John W. Davis, 1873 to 1955, a lawyer for J.P. Morgan, trustee for the Otis Rockefeller Foundation, West Virginia Congressman, 1911 to 1913, U.S. Solicitor General, 1913 to 1918, advisor to the Paris Peace Conference 1919, ambassador to the United Kingdom under President Wilson 1918 to 1921, and a prominent founder of the Black Pope's New York Council on Foreign Relations 1921. Davis was assigned to play the role of the Otis-controlled opponent of its designs, always losing to his apparent opposition, secretly ruled by the company. As the 1924 Democratic presidential candidate, Davis deliberately split the party, as did the Otis Masonic Stephen Douglas in 1860. He denounced the lynching, pseudo-Protestant anti-Jew Ku Klux Klan, newly created in 1915, to be the Masonically led anti-Catholic white supremacist intended losing reaction to the Otis Knight of Columbus / Rockefeller financed Masonically led pro-Catholic, pro-ecumenical, pseudo-Baptist and Protestant integrationist intended winning action of the NAACP, previously created in 1909. Davis's attack was at the instance of Tammany Hall's Knights of Columbus, thus ensuring a landslide victory for Republican President Calvin Coolidge, having ascended to the presidency through the Otis Poison Cup, given a Shriner-worn jihading. In 1932, the company sought to make Shriner FDR a fascist dictator using Marine Corps General Smedley Butler. One of the three traitors who approached Butler was none other than Masonic John W. Davis, returning to private practice, where he, before the Supreme Court, 140 times lost several constitutional challenges relating to FDR's Socialist New Deal. He grandly lost in the Otis Brown versus Board of Education 1954 agitation before a Masonically ruled court at the suit of NAACP attorney Masonic Thurgood Marshall. 1 year before his death, Davis witnessed the 1954 completion of the Otis Wheeling Jesuit University in his native West Virginia, further destroying the white Protestant South. Fascist Freemason Benito Mussolini in the Vatican in 1929. Since 1870, the papacy had been rightly denied its temporal power. The Pope was no longer the Vicar of Christ and the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. The King of Italy, having taken away the White Pope's pretended right to politically rule all nations in spite of canon law and the evil Council of Trent, therefore, based upon the Jesuit-authored Syllabus of Errors in 1864, the company created its deceptively anti-communist Jesuit fascism, first in Italy, bringing Mussolini to power. In 1922, 1 year before Hitler's failed Beer-Halt-Putsch, Il Duce immediately gave financial aid to Archbishop Eugenio Pacelli's Bavarian Nazis prior to Hitler's putsch, which aid continued throughout the 20s. In 1929, the very year Papal Nuncio Pacelli consumed the Concordat with Prussia, Mussolini signed a Concordat with Pope Pius XI, Secretary of State Pietro Cardinal Gaspari. With Jesuit Pietro Tacchi Venturi, 1861 to 1956, conducting negotiations, the Black Pope's Lateran Accords were finalized, which included a restoration of the Pope's temporal power, the creation of the sovereign state of Vatican City, the oppression of Protestantism, prohibiting evangelical meetings in private homes, and the circulation of Protestant Bibles, and decreeing that Roman Catholicism was to be Italy's official state religion. Pictured above is Mussolini in the Vatican after betraying his own Italian people by signing the Otis Concordat. In 1938, his Supreme Council of the Fascist Party removed every Jewish officer from the army. All of the above would have been impossible without the financial credit of the Otis New York Federal Reserve Bank. Mussolini, Dennis Mack, 1982. 33rd degree Freemason Henry Ford and the Nazis, 1938. Words cannot express the Machiavellian duplicity of America's most renowned automaker, apostate Protestant Episcopalian anti-Jewish race, CFR-controlled Masonic Jesuit temporal coadjutor Henry Ford. Although he openly attacked the Jews on Wall Street, he never crossed swords with brother anti-Jew Gentile Masons Morgan and Rockefeller, as he needed both the U.S. Steel and Standard Oil to build and fuel his vehicles. Residing in Detroit near the Orders University at Detroit Mercy and openly associated with nearby anti-Jew hate radio priest Charles Coughlin, Ford published his Dearborn Independent, which parroted the anti-Jewish race rhetoric, further igniting the international Jewish question within the U.S. In 1924 published his 4-volume set, The International Jew, ghostwritten by Jesuit coadjutors and also published in Germany, which quoted the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, also written by Jesuits at the time of the Dreyfus Affair, 1890s. Published in 1925, the priest-written Mein Kampf cited both the Protocols and the International Jew, its anti-Jewish doctrines being identical to the company's Roman monthly La Civiltà Cattolica. Ford not only converted German youth to Nazism, but financed Hitler through General Ludendorff, the idol of Germany. In 1928, Ford also merged his German assets with Rockefeller-backed IG Farben, for which Hitler hung a picture of his ugly American in his office at Munich's Braunhaus. In 1938, Hitler gave finances, Ford and Mussolini the Grand Cross of the Supreme Order of the German Eagle, both fascist, Masonic coadjutors having created a Führer with whom the order would wage its Eurasian crusade. Who financed Hitler? The secret funding of Hitler's rise to power, James Poole. Freemasons, Thomas W. Lamont and John P. Morgan Jr. in 1936. Lamont, senior partner in the House of Morgan and another key founder of the order, CFR, speaks with Morgan during the 9 Merchant of Death hearings on Morgan's financing of World War I. George Whitney is in the center. 33rd degree Freemasons, King George VI and J.P. Morgan Jr. 1939. Jew-hating white Gentile apostate Protestant Morgan, whose banking interests were wedded to the Bank of England through partner Teddy Grenfell, speaks with King George VI at Washington's Embassy Garden. Masonic leaders of both England and Germany, financed by the House of Morgan, would continue the Pope's Second 30 Years' War, further destroying white Protestant nations, the House of Morgan, an American banking dynasty, and the rise of modern finance. Ron Chernow. Masonic Gentile bankers Hjalmar Schacht and Montagu Norman, 1938. Apostate Protestant Reichsbank President Schacht greets the Bank of England's apostate Protestant Governor Norman. Both were Jew-hating white Gentile Masons financing the order's anti-Jew secret German Mason Adolf Hitler. Gentile Freemasons, the Duke of Windsor and Adolf Hitler, 1936. King Edward VII, named Duke of Windsor, having abdicated over his marriage to an American divorcee, was a political and financial supporter of the Masonic German Order's Jesuit-ruled Thule Society, its backing pan-German, anti-Jew, anti-communist Adolf Hitler. The order used its apostate Protestant Masonic magnates of the West to finance its fascist Roman Catholic dictators of Europe, Hitler, Mussolini, and Franco, via the order's New York Federal Reserve Bank, the House of Morgan, an American banking dynasty, and the rise of modern finance. Ron Chernow. Who financed Hitler? James Poole. Jewish Freemason Edward Mandell House, 1858 to 1938, advisor to President Woodrow Wilson, 1913 to 1921, a key individual of the New York Archbishop's control of the Democratic Party through Tammany Hall. Colonel House, known as the Holy Monk, was directly involved in making Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt presidents of the American Empire. As Wilson's advisor and alter ego, he pressed for the passage of J.P. Morgan's Federal Reserve Act, put forth by the order's token Masonic Jewish Zionist Paul Warburg. House As the supposed author of Philip Drew, administrators sought to convert America into a socialist communist state, as dreamed of by Karl Marx. Democrat and Knight of Columbus Al Smith, New York's four-term socialist Roman Catholic governor, paved the way for the FDR's evil socialist New Deal of the early 1930s. The Black Pope's New Deal, modeled after Pope Pius XI's 1931 encyclical Quadragesimo Anno, advocated by Jew-baiting pro-Nazi corporate fascist, father of hate radio, ex-Basilian secret Jesuit priest Charles Coughlin, was the thieving legislative remedy which deceived the nation into believing the FDR brought it through the Great Depression caused by the greatest short seller stock, Patrick Cardinal Hayes, Knight of Malta Joseph P. Kennedy. House was also responsible for bringing a pro-German, isolationist, white Protestant American people into the Great War on the side of Romans Triple Entente. Two of the Jesuits' many victories of World War I were the destruction of Prince Bismarck's Protestant German Empire and the lessening of America's hard money supply by melting down 270 million Morgan silver dollars, 270,232,722 for the war effort. The New Encyclopedia Britannica, 15th edition. President Woodrow Wilson, Mrs. Wilson, and Colonel House, 1917. Speaking fluent German, egotistical Princeton professor and former New Jersey governor, Thomas Woodrow Wilson, a native Virginian and first president to hold and earn doctorate, was the order's chosen vessel for socialist revolution both domestically and internationally, a protector of Morgan's cartel capitalism and a Marxist communist. Comrade Wilson, the apostate Protestant son of a Presbyterian minister, was put into office by James Cardinal Gibbons using Theodore Roosevelt's third-party candidacy. Once in office, he lowered the protective tariff, signed the Marxist Federal Reserve Act into law, defended Masonic President Taft's Marxist 16 personal non-apportioned income tax amendment, enacted another Marxist income tax, raising one half of America's $33 billion spent on the Black Pope's World War I, and praised the Bolsheviks as they were murdering the anti-Jesuit white Russian Orthodox middle class for the greater glory of God. Further, Wilson instituted a wicked national draft, turning the country into an armed camp. He enforced food rationing with meatless Mondays and wheatless Wednesdays and began daylight savings time, the Pope's military-industrial wartime. With the company's British, German, and American military intelligence agencies working together, Wilson led the U.S. into a crusade to make the world safe for democracy, resulting in 117,000 American deaths, with 2.8 million U.S. servicemen sent to Europe. After the war, Wilson visited Rome, was given an audience with Pope Benedict XV, promoted U.S. ratification of the Pope's Versailles Treaty, including the Evil League of Nations, for which world peace bade. He received the Order's Nobel Peace Prize. On October 2nd, 1919, the president suffered a second stroke, leaving his second wife, Edith Galt Wilson, to play out his stewardship as acting president until March in 1921, the Order all the while in command. On February 3rd, 1924, with his wife and execution at his bedside, heretic Wilson, having failed the Pope, died of apoplexy and not a victim of the poison cup. The intimate papers of Colonel House, Charles Seymour. New York, Masonic Jewish banker Jacob H. Schiff, 1847 to 1920. Morgan, submissive Rothschild partner behind his Federal Reserve Act, 1913. Finance of the Black Pope's Russo-Japanese War, 1904 to 1905. World War I, 1914 to 1918. And Bolshevik Revolution, 1917 to 1920. Conquering heretic Orthodox Russia. The Reparations Commission, Paris Peace Conference, 1919. Mason J.P. Morgan Jr. is represented by Thomas W. Lamont, standing at the far left. Mason Edward M. House, standing in the middle. Herbert Hoover sits at the far left. And New York Masonic Jewish Labor Zionist Bernard Baruch sits second from the right. This open and most notorious influence of Masonic Jews in the destruction of the Protestant German Second Reich through World War I and the subsequent rapacious peace conference created the apparent justification for the Order's Nazi Party to call for the extermination of European Jewry, the House of Morgan American banking dynasty, Ron Chernow. Marshall Falk at Old North, Jesuit, Georgetown University, 1919. Supreme Allied Commander of the Order's Triple Entente Forces, Masonic French Roman Catholic Marshal Ferdinand Foch was the Black Pope's second Napoleon Bonaparte, commanding Masonic British General Sir Douglas Haig and privately directing his legally independent subordinate, Masonic German General John G. Pershing, with Temporal Coadjutor Foch secretly working in collusion with his German counterparts Generals Hindenburg and Ludendorff. The company would make the manhood of Germany, Russia, Italy, Britain, and France pay dearly for its rulers' 19th century expulsions of the Order as payback for Bismarck's defeat of the Order's Napoleon III in the Franco-Prussian War. Undefeated Germany was tricked via the 14 points of President Wilson into accepting Ludendorff's requested armistice, but was then forced to submit to the rapacious new terms of the wicked Treaty of Versailles, including unconditional surrender and the forfeiture of all Reichsbank gold. Backed by Wilson's Masonic Templar coadjutors, Thomas W. Lamont, John Foster Dulles, and Bernard Baruch, the Order extorted German acceptance of the Versailles Treaty via cruel military blockade of all food importation encircling the nation. England blockaded Germany's Baltic north coast, and Foch enforced the Order's unsparing blockade by land. Above, Masonic Crusader Ferdinand Foch, the intimate friend of the Order's American Knights of Columbus, stands with his black-robed masters at America's secret capital, Jesuit Georgetown University. Georgetown University, first in the nation's capital. Joseph T. Durkin. Masonic Field Marshals Ferdinand Foch and Sir Douglas Haig, 1919. Haig fought the battles of the Somme 1916 and Passchendaele 1917, sending hundreds of thousands of British soldiers to their deaths, earning the nickname the Butcher of the Somme. The Order's Masonic military coadjutors on both sides cunningly conducted a war of attrition, slaughtering the finest of white, British, French, German, Russian, and Italian heretic and liberal manhood. General of the U.S. Armies John J. Black Jack Pershing, 1920. Called Nigger Jack by West Point cadets due to his command of black soldiers during the Order's ethnic cleansing of American Indians, apostate Protestant Pershing fought the Pope's Wars from the Spanish-American to World War I. Promoted to Brigadier General via the Masonic influence of President Theodore Roosevelt, he created the Empire's National Army, promoted in 1920 to full generalship, held only by Washington, Grant, Sherman, and Sheridan. His World War I command of America's 2 million troops had led to the Fed's defeat of the Hun in 1918. The Crown Prince Ruprecht and Kaiser Wilhelm II, 1916. As army commander in the West, Crown Prince Ruprecht von Wittelsbach was a Knight of Malta whose first allegiance was to the Pope of Rome. With Knight of Malta, Franz von Pappen's Catholic Center Party repealing the anti-Jesuit laws of 1872, the Sons of Loyola legally re-entered the Prussian Empire in April of 1917, bringing with them the might of their Federal Reserve-backed American military. The Black Pope was eager to finally defeat the Kaiser's otherwise invincible German armies. Freemason and Grand Admiral from Tirpitz, unrestricted submarine warfare, secretly aided by Ireland's Jesuits and Britain's Lord of Admiralty, Freemason Winston Churchill, effectually brought America into war. Prince Ruprecht, advised by the Jesuits in the field, including wounded Munich Jesuit chaplain Rupert Mayer, contributed to General Ludendorff's request for an armistice and the abdication of Protestant Kaiser Wilhelm II. The Crown Prince would return to his Bavarian court, where he would conspire with Papal Nuncio Archbishop Eugenio Pacelli and Munich Archbishop Michael Cardinal von Faulhaber to bring Freemason Adolf Hitler to power and the final destruction of heretic white Protestant Prussia. The guns of August Barbara Tuchman. Hindenburg, Wilhelm II, and Ludendorff at headquarters 1917. Ludendorff coldly betrayed his Kaiser and ultimately brought Hitler to power from Papen and forced Hindenburg to consent to Hitler's chancellorship in 1933. Hitler and associates on trial for the Beer-Hall-Putsch. 1924. Putschists are left to right: Pernod, Weber, Frick, Kriebel, General Ludendorff, Hitler, Bruckner, Röhm, and Wagner. Insubordinate to the Kaiser and contributing to Germany's defeat, Jesuit temple coadjutor Erich Ludendorff blamed Masonic Jewish political leaders and bankers for the Bolshevik Revolution and Germany's horrible economic collapse as a result of the evil Versailles Treaty. He promoted Hitler's Nazi Party, financially backed by the Black Pope's Federal Reserve Bank of New York and Masonic Montagu Norman's Bank of England. Norman working with Reichsbank President Masonic Gentile Hjalmar. The Burden of Guilt, A Short History of Germany, 1914 to 1945, Hannah Yoke. 33rd degree Freemason Warren G. Harding, 1865 to 1923. 29th President of the United States of America, 1921 to 1923. Unaware, 12th Commander-in-Chief of the Pope's Holy Roman 14th Amendment, Corporate Fascist American Empire, 1921 to 1923. Condemned Baptist heretic, accursed political liberal, first mulatto president according to hometown and historical sources, Ohio State Republican Senator, 1899 to 1903, Lieutenant Governor, 1903 to 1905, Conservative Republican, U.S. Senator, against dictator Wilson, 1914 to 1921. Voted to declare war against Germany, backing the company's World War I, 1917. Voted for 18th Amendment prohibition, benefiting the Black Pope's Mafia. Voting for 19th Amendment women's suffrage, ignorantly benefiting the Romans' hierarchy control of the vote. Further creating socialist democracy, backed for presidential bid by Cardinal Gibbons' Republican Ohio gang. Campaigned on a return to normalcy after Wilson's socialism in World War I. Landslide election. Refused to support U.S. membership in the Black Pope's League of Nations. Cut taxes. Reduced unemployment. Created the borough of the budget. Reduced war deficit. Increased GNP via laissez-faire economics. Limited foreign immigration. Resisting the order. Making America Catholic. Appointed 4 conservative sub-CT justices who opposed FDR's New Deal, a political and economic isolationist, preaching America's first, refusing military alliances, and passing the largest protective tariff in U.S. history. Battled J.P. Morgan's U.S. Steel to reduce its workday from 12 to 8 hours. Advocated illiterate American blacks should vote, not illiterate foreign whites. Denounced lynching. Released anti-World War I Eugene Debs imprisoned by Wilson. Signed the 1922 Fish Resolution supporting a Jewish state for Jews. Given the company's Poison Cup by Charles Doc Sawyer on orders of Attorney General Harry M. Doughty. Sawyer, aided by the Duchess Mrs. Florence Harding and Harding's private secretary George B. Christian Jr. Shriner Warren Harding, 1865 to 1923, born to abolitionist medical doctor George Harding in the fugitive slave district of Blooming Grove, Ohio. Warren was the oldest of 8 children. His mother Phoebe, a Seventh-day Adventist, instilling his son Protestant morality, daily reading the Lord's AV 1611 Bible. Able to read at age 4, Warren was not exceptionally bright and bore the stigma that he was part nigger. His paternal great-grandmother Elizabeth Madison having been a negress. Graduating from Ohio Central College at 16, he became sole owner of the Marion Star and openly posted his journalistic style office creed, enjoined upon all of his employees. Successful in business, the ruinous mistake of Warren's life was in marrying the wicked Florence King an unwed mother who hated her abusive father and sought to dominate all men, thereby, according to Harding, giving him a hell of a life, while driving him into the arms of many other women, including Nan Britton. Surnamed the Duchess, Florence regularly invited astrologer Madame Marcia to the White House, the witch having previously foretold that Warren would be elected president but would suddenly die in office by poison. Brought to Washington via the successful election campaign of the Otis, Ohio gang led by criminal intriguer Harry M. Daugherty. Harding nonetheless accomplished much good for our countries after the Otis sacrifice of 116,708 American soldiers and the forced indebtedness of billions of dollars to the Black Pope's Federal Reserve bankers, having financed Socialist Woodrow Wilson's World War I de facto dictatorship. Seeking a return to normalcy, Harding reestablished political and economic isolation, limited the powers of the chief executive, declaring that relief measures were local responsibility, and sought to rebuild private, laissez-faire free enterprise. Aided by Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, he refused to join the papacy's League of Nations. He refused to engage in any treaty that would require military response in defense of the contractual parties, thereby avoiding another world war. He sponsored the 1921 Washington Conference for the limitation of armament, boldly declaring our hundreds of millions want less of armaments and none of war. He created a borough budget binding the federal government to a fixed budget for the first time in history. He called for less government in business, as did President Ronald Reagan, and signed the Fortney-McCumber Act in 1922, setting the highest tariffs in American history, protecting the products of both farm and factory, and he ended the Depression of 1920 within 18 months, igniting the prosperity of the roaring 20s. But Harding's immoral life emboldened his enemies against him. Betrayed by several cabinet members, wife, and closest friends, Harding was given the Otis poison cup, after which the Duchess refused an autopsy, immediately embalmed the body, was without feeling at the most attentive funeral service since the Lincoln assassination, and subsequently burned nearly all the president's letters. For resisting the Otis policies, Warren Harding's reputation was ruined, exactly as was done to JFK. President Harding, Doc Sawyer, Christian and Florence, 1923. The last picture of Harding was taken as he disembarked the train at San Francisco, ruled by the Jesuits, in which they swim in the Golden Sea, according to ex-priest Charles Chiniquy. The president died in the city's Palace Hotel under the eye of the company's fortress at its University San Francisco, built in 1855. The Black Pope's assassins at President Harding's funeral, 1923. According to the then FBI agent and former Harding Secret Service agent Walter Thayer's 350,000-word 1930 report titled The Harding Poison Murder Case, the president was poisoned 4 times during his voyage of understanding, ending with his death in San Francisco. Harding's homeopathic physician, Brigadier General and Rasputin to the Duchess Charles, Doc Sawyer, was the cunning murderer, aided by Florence the Duchess, Harding, and by the president's controlling White House secretary, George B. Christian Jr., rightly called a popish plot by the KKK. The murder was indeed overseen by the Otis, Edward B. Ned McLean, to Attorney General Daugherty, who was never convicted for any of his crimes. Masonic Jesuit coadjutor J. Edgar Hoover destroyed Thayer's report, calling him mentally unbalanced. Hoover would again destroy key evidence in the Kennedy assassination 40 years later. Florence Harding, the First Lady, the Jazz Age, and the Death of America's Most Scandalous President, Carl S. Anthony. Harry M. Daugherty, 1860 to 1941, and Jess Smith, 1922. The Black Popes controlling Coadjutor Daugherty's Ohio gang and Chicago's 1920 Republican National Convention put Masonic Harding in office, preparing for World War II and furthering his Counter-Reformation. The president then appointed Daugherty as Attorney General, secretly ruled by his $1-a-year employee, multi-millionaire, and Washington Post owner Ned McLean, whose Irish Catholic wife, Evelyn, was the intimate friend of the Duchess and owner of the accursed Hope Diamond. Deporting Marcus Garvey for opposing the mongrelization of America, Daugherty built the Ortiz liquor empire, his sodomite companion Jess Smith selling permits to certain mafiosos and bootleggers, including Papal Knight Joseph P. Kennedy. The AG's Bureau of Investigation, BI, was the corrupt William J. Billy Burns, the boss of corrupt Gaston Means, who later diverted attention away from Harding's real assassins, claiming the Duchess acted alone. His second in command was Masonic J. Edgar Hoover, who, until the 1963 congressional testimony of informer Joseph Valakai, denied the existence of the Mafia. In 1922, Congress charged Daugherty that he had failed to enforce the antitrust laws, had refused to prosecute war profiteers and bootleggers, had obtained pardons for favored criminals, had employed corrupt people in the Justice Department, had sent federal agents to harass congressional critics, which increased during Senator Thomas J. Walsh's 1923 investigation of the Teapot Dome scandal, had diverted funds to illegal uses, and had failed to prosecute the Rockefeller Standard Oil for trespassing on government oil lands, thus protecting the Ortiz CFR-led invisible business empire, legal and illegal. Harding was then murdered, blamed for all of Daugherty's scandals, including Teapot Dome involving oil magnate and Nada Malta Edward L. Donny, who both built and filled U.S. naval oil tanks in Hawaii in preparation for World War II. Coadjutor Daugherty died unscathed after 20 years of peaceful retirement. Florence Harding, the First Lady, Jazz Age, and the Death of America's Most Scandalous President, Carl S. Anthony. Masonic British General Allenby entering Jerusalem 1917, alas, without firing a shot. And after Muslim rule for 673 years, the Holy City is finally yielded by the company's Masonically ruled Islamic Ottoman Empire to the company's Masonically ruled Vatican-controlled Protestant British Empire. On December 11th, Field Marshal Edmund Henry Hindman Allenby, commander of the British and Allied forces, entered the city through Jaffa Gate, following the custom of the Pope's Crusaders, declaring he would not march into the city of the great king as a conqueror, but as a pilgrim. The empire's finest cavalry commander dismounted, entering on foot. General Allenby enabled the Ortiz British Masonic labor Zionists, financed by the Vatican's Jewish Rothschild bankers, to restore the Pope's Holy Roman Empire, with its crucially historic Kingdom of Jerusalem to be created in 1948, the Nation of Israel. During the 21st century, the Third Hebrew Temple is to be built for Satan's Antichrist. Its financing will come from Rome's Federal Reserve Bank, ruled by the SMON. History of the World War, an authentic narrative of the world's greatest war, Francis A. March. The Honorable Louis T. McFadden, 1876 to 1936, as our chairman of the Committee of Banking and Currency, Republican Pennsylvania Congressman Louis McFadden, 1915 to 1935, righteously declared war on the Black Pope's Federal Reserve Bank, decrying that the Federal Reserve Board had usurped the government of the United States. On January 13, 1932, he introduced the resolution indicting the Federal Reserve Board of Governors for criminal conspiracy, alleging it had conspired to destroy constitutional government in the United States. With the act ignored for nearly a year, on December 13, 1932, he put forth a motion to impeach the Otis CFR Bohemian Grove member, President Herbert Hoover. It failing, McFadden was declared legally dead by the CFR-controlled Republican Majority Leader of the House with the silent consent of the Democrats. 6 months later, on May 23, 1933, he went for the bank's jugular, introducing House Resolution number 158, seeking to impeach the Secretary of the Treasury. 2 assistant Treasury secretaries and the Fed's Board of Governors, along with the officers and directors of the Fed banks for conspiracy, fraud, and treason, including their collusion in causing the Great Depression by extending $80 billion in bank credit in 1928, resulting in the 1929 collapse of the market, aided by a great short seller of stock, Cardinal Hayes Knight of Malta, Joseph P. Kennedy. McFadden knew that the Fed had financed World War I, the Bolshevik Revolution, and now the rise of fascism in Germany. Fearing the ascent of an absolutist dictator beholden to a foreign-ruled bank that had stolen the nation's gold, our hero made one grave mistake. He followed the leadership of Henry Ford and Charles A. Lindbergh by blaming the international Jews. Never a word was uttered against the Vatican or its American trusted third party, the company CFR ruling the Fed, then and now full of Jewish labor Zionists betraying their own race while beholden to the papacy. In 1936, after 2 attempts on his life, the first by gunshot and the second by food poisoning, McFadden died suddenly of intestinal flu. Yes, an invisible hand slipped him the poison cup. Freemasons FDR and Mariner S. Eccles, Fed Chairman, 1935. With the company using short seller Joseph P. Kennedy and its Federal Reserve Bank to cause the Great Depression of 1929, the Otis calculated solution was its Socialist New Deal. A key player was the son of a rich Utah banker, Mormon Freemason Mariner S. Eccles, far right. Following the socialist rhetoric of the Otis radio priest Charles Coughlin, Eccles advocated deficit spending in the form of paternal relief measures, including a minimum wage law, unemployment insurance, and old age pensions. Appointed Secretary of the Treasury in 1933. 10 months later, he became Chairman of the Federal Reserve Board 1934 to 1948. He wrote the Banking Act of 1935, signing the law above, thereby perfecting the Fed by centralizing all power in its Federal Reserve Board and establishing the independence of the board from the Treasury. Eccles, given the appearance of saving the bank, created the monster that it is today. Its New York branch and Federal Reserve Board in Washington, now ruled by Georgetown Jesuits through the key bank offices, who are notorious CFR members. Eccles went on to become the U.S. delegate to New Hampshire's 1944 Bretton Woods Conference, which created the Black Pope's World Bank and International Monetary Fund, thus paving the way for world commerce under that Manus and the Beast. Like Romanism, the Mormon Empire under the guise of religion is a tentacle of the Order's invisible empire. Jesuit Pierre de Smet directing Mason Brigham Young to the Great Salt Lake when they met at Council Bluffs, Iowa. In 1946, Know Your Government, the Federal Reserve System, Gary Taylor. Knights of Malta, William E. Simon and Gerald R. Ford, 1975. This White House meeting over the New York City fiscal crisis of 1975 illustrates the unified economic power of the Archbishop of New York's bankers guiding the policies of the American president from left to right. L. William Seidman, President Ford's economic assistant. Elmo C. Patterson, chairman of J.P. Morgan and Company. CFR member Walter B. Wriston, chairman of Citicorp, the largest bank in the United States. Nada Morton, CFR member William E. Simon, Secretary of the Treasury, who with congressional approval negotiated a government loan to Nida Malta Lee Jacocas Chrysler Corporation for the rebuilding of its manufacturing base, including its M1 tank production capabilities in preparation for the Ortiz crusade against Islamic countries. Knights of Malta 33rd degree Freemason CFR member President Gerald R. Ford, a Warren Commission member, an accomplice in the JFK assassination. 33rd degree Freemason Bilderberger CFR chairman of the board 1970-1985 David Rockefeller, chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank, and the Austrian-born Roman Catholic CFR member Arthur F. Burns, chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, Washington, D.C. Papal Knights Simon and Ford, under the guidance of the CFR ruled by the Jesuits at Georgetown and Fordham universities, were the Ortiz trusted third parties at that time administering the Black Pope's cartel capitalist social communist economic policies of the Holy Roman 14th Amendment American Empire. Every subsequent administration, Republican or Democratic, has continued to be the Ortiz trusted third party, implementing the decisions of the CFR. John F. Kennedy knowingly resisted his Jesuit masters, for which he was publicly terminated. The House of Morgan, an American banking dynasty, and the rise of modern finance. Ron Chernow. The Eccles Building, Fed Headquarters, Washington, D.C., 1989. As Hawaii's lay Mormon temple was patterned after the ancient Temple of Solomon, even so the Eccles Building resembles the historic Jerusalem temple. Distinct from the location and function of the Department of the Treasury, the impressive pagan cathedral, built for the Federal Reserve Board, illustrates the power of the Black Popes decreeing the empire's economic policies. The Fed is controlled through the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, with offices in both New York City and Washington, D.C. The CFR is overseen and guided by the Jesuits at Georgetown University. The Ortiz enforces, keeping all politicians in line who may be a threat to its Fed, is the FBI/CIA, the co-assassins of JFK. Know your government, the Federal Reserve System. Gary Taylor, page 56. The Black Pope's Federal Reserve Bank, New York City, 2002. Built upon the blood and treasure of all Americans, this most important bank of the 12-member banks financed the Pope's Second 30 Years' War, 1914 to 1945, both sides of the Pope's Cold War, including the military and financial buildup of fascist Roman Catholic post-war Europe, Communist Russia, Red China, Islamic Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia, 1945 to 1989, and now the papacy's Anglo-American-led crusade against the Muslims. Holding the largest gold reserves in history, this Vatican monopoly has enslaved the United States via its exclusive privilege to create credit for the unlimited use of the Congress, thus resulting in a massive national debt protected by the 14th Amendment. Know your government, the Federal Reserve System. Gary Taylor, page 93. Federal Reserve Bank's Gold Vault, New York City, 2000. Totaling over 600,000 bars of bullion, this is the Black Pope's mountain of gold obtained by deceit, murder, and war for the last 100 years. Ably explained by the brilliant Jew Emanuel M. Josephson in his masterpiece, The Federal Reserve Conspiracy and the Rockefellers, their gold corner, the Ortiz succeeded in consolidating all of the nation's gold into the basement of its Federal Reserve Bank in New York City, its first chairman having been Skull and Bonesman Piaget, by its trusted third party, the Council on Foreign Relations, using their knights of every stripe manning the Masonic banking houses of Morgan and Rockefeller. The company has given the world nothing but worthless paper currencies with which to transact business since the end of the global gold standard in 1971. After the papacy's present world war against the peoples of Islam and the West, America will be defeated and partitioned, its Roman Catholic Northeast to be occupied by European forces. These gold bars will be moved to Israel via Switzerland to adorn the third Hebrew temple, the Temple of Gold. Revelation 11 verses 1 and 2. The orders, rich merchants of the earth have heaped treasure together for the last days. Revelation 18:11, James 5 verse 3, Smithsonian as good as gold, T.J. Stiles. Page 114, Knight of Malta, William J. McDonough, 2002. Georgetown University Jesuit-trained economist, CFR Board of Directors, President and CEO, Federal Reserve Bank of New York, member of the Bilderberg Group, member of the Trilateral Commission, board member with Knight Boise, Carnegie Corporation of New York. Freemasons Peter G. Peterson and Alan Greenspan, 2000. Peterson the Gentile, a former chairman/CEO of Lehman Brothers and Kuhn, Loeb and Company, 77 to 84, is presently chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and chairman of the Orders Council of Foreign Relations, CFR, holding an honorary doctorate from the Jesuit Georgetown University. Greenspan the Jew, a former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors under 33rd degree Freemason President Gerald Ford, was the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board 1986 to 2006, is a powerful member of the CFR and an honorary Knight Commander of the Black Popes, British Empire as of 2002. Knight of Malta Jeffrey T. Boise, 2005. Pictured above is one of the many powerful Roman Catholic American Knights of Malta serving the occult government of the Black Pope. Mr. Boise's extensive resume illustrates the totality of control with which the Jesuit order rules the American empire's investment banking industry. The power extends and has always extended to prominent New York's Jewish banking firms via the Orders, New York-based Council on Foreign Relations. This cleverly hidden truth lays to rest the rhetoric of right-wing neo-fascist propagandists of every stripe, who deceptively blame the Jews in general for the Great Depression of 1929, our de facto national bankruptcy in 1933, and the resultant financial monetary monopoly of the company's wicked Federal Reserve System, its New York branch holding the nation's gold reserve, to which FDR, whose 1924 political comeback he attributed to New York Governor Knight of Columbus Al Smith, gave all right, title, and interest. Mr. Boise is a trustee of the Carnegie Corporation of New York, the chairman and senior partner of Roundtable Investment Partners LLC, a general partner in Rome Group LP, a special limited partner of the Tremont Group LLC, a member of the board of directors of Freddie Mac, an overseer of the Wharton School, which New York Roman Catholic industrialist Donald Trump attended, a trustee of the Orders Boston College, a director of the CFR Control Brookings Institute, a trustee of Knight of Malta Joseph P. Kennedy Enterprises, a member of the Trilateral Commission, a trustee of the Papal Foundation. Mr. Boise has been vice chairman of J.P. Morgan Chase, serving as CEO of J.P. Morgan, evidencing the bond between both Morgan and Rockefeller empires, a founding member of the Beacon Group, acquired by Chase, a senior member of Goldman Sachs, serving as partner in charge of global finance, head of investment banking services, and partner in charge of mergers and acquisitions, receiving the Cancer Research Institute Oliver R. Grace Award, and honored by John Paul II as a steward of St. Peter. Mr. Boise serves the great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Revelation 17 verse 18. Knight of Malta Edward L. Hennessy Jr., 2006. The Jesuits always keep their fascist Roman Catholic cartel capitalists out of sight while parading their socialist communist CFR controlled Masonic core Jews in the limelight, thus proving the international communist conspiracy for world government is Jewish. Let us read the resume of this powerful papal knight given by Florida's Palm Beach Civic Association for 2006. Mr. Hennessy served as the chairman of the board and CEO of Allied Signal Incorporated from 1979 to 1992. Prior to that, he was executive vice president, director, and a member of the executive committee of the United Technologies Corporation. Mr. Hennessy was a financial consultant to the Vatican and a former director of 6 New York Stock Exchange companies. He served 2 terms on the board of the New York Federal Reserve Bank, proving that the privately owned Fed is ruled by the agents of its owner, the Pope of Rome. He's a trustee of Stevens Institute of Technology in Palm Beach Community Chest/United Way, where he co-chaired the Alexis de Tocqueville Society for 3 years and is a director of the Palm Beach Fellowship of Christians and Jews, Roman Catholic, Papal Knights, Masonic Protestants, and Masonic Court Jews serving the Pope and the Palm Beach Round Table. He served on the Shore Protection Board for the town of Palm Beach. Mr. Hennessy was vice chairman of the National March of Dimes and is a former 14-year chairman and a trustee of his alma mater, Farley Dickinson University. He has several honorary degrees and is a Knight of Malta, Knight of St. Gregory, as is the fascist New Republican Right Ajax, CFR member, and Fox News media mogul Rupert Murdoch, and Knight of the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre. Knight Hennessy and his brother Crusaders ruled the American Empire at its most crucial centers of religious, financial, and political power. Hennessy is the slave of his master at St. Patrick's Palace Cathedral in New York City, the Archbishop of the capital of the world, Edward Cardinal Egan. Knight of Malta, Lachlan Reed, 2006. Knowing that British SIS agent and Knight of Malta Sir John Philby was the most important player in making IBN sword the King of Saudi Arabia, thereby giving Mecca and Medina into the hands of the Yordis, Nazi, fascist, Wahhabi Islamists, we can understand how the papacy rules the Saudi Arabian oil fields. One of the Pope's agents is Knight Lachlan Reed, whose fellow directors in Florida's Palm Beach Civic Association also include Knight of Malta Alexander M. Haig Jr. Dr. Reed's business, governmental, and philanthropic work in the U.S. and abroad stems from his birth in Turkey and experience in the Middle East. After Andover, Yale, and the U.S. Navy in World War II, he taught at Andover, was a special assistant in the Eisenhower presidency, which employed several Knights of Malta, including Charles E. Boland and the Dulles brothers, and later an executive with Honeywell. In the 1960s and the 1970s, he organized several startup businesses in the Arab Gulf states: General Electric Radar, Saudi Arabia, DuPont Explosive, Dubai, Oman, Caterpillar, Abu Dhabi, and Dairy Queen, several states. In Stockholm and London, his computer systems international companies became part of Bankers Trust and Trade Acts. Reed headed volunteer pro bono medical missions to Egypt, Syria, Palestine, Turkey, Iraq, and Yemen. Currently, as a member of the Orders of St. John, Knights of Malta, he helps the Orders Ophthalmological Hospital in East Jerusalem. Currently, as a member of the Order of St. John, Knights of Malta, he helps the Orders Ophthalmological Hospital in East Jerusalem. He's an active trustee of the American University in Cairo, International College in Beirut, Amethyst and NERA, and Americans for Middle East Understanding. A Palm Beach resident since 1980, he serves on the boards of the Society of the Four Arts, the Preservation and Biomotion Foundations, and the Palm Beach Tennis Patrons. He's a member of the Society of the Four Arts and of the Bath and Tennis, Everglades, and Seminole Golf Clubs. This knight is one of the several hospitalists presently ruling Arab Muslims nations for benefit of the Vatican. Papal Caesar J.P. II at the Capitol, Washington, D.C., 1995. What was once the legitimate fear of American Protestants and Baptists is now a stark reality. The devil's Pope of Rome rules the Holy Roman 14th Amendment American Empire. Indeed, Washington is in the lap of Rome. The order, with its 28 colleges and universities, has gained plenary control over the empire's religious, economic, military, academic, and industrial affairs. With the ascendancy of Masonic Theodore Rex Roosevelt to the presidency via the Orders, assassination of William McKinley, the executive mansion was renamed the White House, as the Pope is always dressed in white. Thus, the empire belongs to the Pope. Its 14th Amendment citizens belong to the Pope. Its White House belongs to the Pope. And the empire's domestic and foreign policies are the Pope's. Financed by his Federal Reserve Bank, overseen by his Knights of Malta within his New York City-based Council on Foreign Relations. Smokescreens, Jack T. Chick, page 89.